Hey there, Kurt Curtis coming at you from the Full Octane Garage. Today we're going to talk about brakes. We're doing a build for a 1950 Chevrolet 5-winded pickup truck. We have gone through and done a Mustang II type front suspension on this truck with a Heights front end. And what we needed to do was upgrade the brakes on this. So what we did is we went to Speedway Motors, and they sell a complete kit, which is rotors, calipers, shoes, the whole works, for a grand total of $239, which is a real bargain for a complete kit. So what we're going to do today is we're going to show you how to put this kit in, how to install it. It comes with brand new GM style rotors. This particular rotor we did to match our rears, which is a 5 on 4 3/4. So we'll have a Chevrolet pattern. It comes with new bearings. It comes with brand new brake pads. It comes with brand new GM calipers. It comes with all of the hoses, mounting hardware, and I've already mounted the brackets on the truck already. So this is a very complete kit. Comes with even new nuts to hold the spindles on. So it's a very complete kit. Hope you stay with us. We'll go ahead and go through and show you the steps on how to install this kit, how we're going to unbox it, things we have to do to prepare for it. And we may have to read the instructions once or twice. We did throw them away once already. I had to dig them back out, so we'll see how long we can go without doing instructions, but at the end of the day we'll probably use them. Now that we've unboxed the parts from our Speedway Motors kit, we started looking at putting the bearings in and greasing the bearings up. And then we noticed that there were races already installed in these particular rotors. And as you know, we typically start off throwing the instructions away just because it's more fun that way usually. This time we had to go back into the trash and get the instructions back and read up a little bit, and it turns out that these have GM races in them, General Motors races, but we're installing it onto a Ford system. The Ford system requires Ford races, Ford bearings, and Ford dust seals. And so when we start talking about bearings, if you look here, this is a race and this is a bearing that fits into the race, and there is a conical side of this to where one side is wider than the other side, because the bearings cannot go in from this side, they have to go in from this side. So we have to go in and hammer those races out so that we can put the new races in. And when you put the new race into the wheel, you want to make sure that the wide end goes outward so that you can set the bearing into it, because if you don't do that, what's going to happen is you're going to pop these things in there and it's going to look all pretty until you go to put the bearings in, and it's not going to work. And at this point, not only is it going to be harder to pop these races out, but they're going to be useless once you take them out. So you're going to be making a trip to the parts store, getting another bearing set and race set. So what we're going to do now is hammer the races out of the old system. The problem we're having is it's just extremely tight. You want to try to use some safety glasses when you can. And we are going to take some, it would be best if you had a brass device so you wouldn't scratch. You got to be real careful not to scratch the surface that you're taking these out on. We're using a steel punch, but we're going to be very careful with it. It's going to make a little bit of noise. You keep working your way around the edges so that it comes out, and it's starting to budge a little bit. Okay, we're just about out. We're going to have to tilt it up to get a little bit of room. And there we go. This is the race for the small bearing, and as I mentioned, it's conical in nature, so one side is larger than the other. This race may have been able to be reused, but usually when you beat the edges, get the camera to focus, usually when you beat the edges a little bit, it doesn't seat right, and you can also damage the surface where the bearings meet, and you don't want to do that. So now we flip it and work on our other side. pop this one out that easy also. So the next step is going to be putting the new races in and making sure not to damage the new races when they go in. So top side, we're going to take the small one first. It helps if they're not in child-proof plastic like these are. And then what we did was we've got a seal setter set that we got from Harbor Freight. Seal setter, it also seats bearings, seals, and what have you. So what we're going to do is find the one that fits this particular bearing. That one's a little big. And if you'll notice, the beauty of these is this particular seal bearing race setter is also conical in shape. And what it does, it will only fit one way into this. So if you fit it in that way, it fits perfect. So you have a perfect surface to be hammering on. And then there's the dowel pin that goes through this, which is here, and that gives you an even surface, so when you're pounding these in, it will go in an even fashion. You don't want these to go in crooked. And you'll start hearing that ting when you get to the bottom. You want to bottom these things out. Seal setter comes back out, and you're all done with that one. You want to make sure that you haven't damaged any of the race, because that'll rub on your bearings and give you premature wear. So we'll flip it over. You want to not confuse your old races and new races. That's why I kept mine in the plastic bags. So we have the new race for the rear. You want to try to clean it out a little bit, make sure that nothing's in there. Then we want to find the right tool for this one. Here we go. Okay, again, that one fits perfectly into the race, so this one should be no problem popping in also. Again, make sure that the conical side is facing out, which is kind of hard not to do when you have the proper set tool. And you want to make sure it's set all the way around evenly, because if it's not, you're not going to have a good seal for your bearings. That one looks pretty good. The next step is going to be to grease your bearings. I'll have a second episode on greasing your bearings. Once you grease your bearings, then you have this dust seal that goes on the back side, and you can't put it in until you put your bearing in there with all of its grease. Put the dust seal on. The dust seal is going to slide over your spindle so that you don't get dust into your grease and contaminate it from the backside. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do the messy job of packing bearings. And we've got the camera zoomed into the work that we're going to be doing so that you can see the process of packing bearings. It's actually a very messy job. But what we're going to do is, to make it a little bit easier, we're going to use some plastic gloves. There are bearing packing tools available. We don't use them enough to warrant having one. So what we do typically is just take a glob of grease and put it in your hands and press it into the bearings and get the bearings. You want to work over a surface so you don't drop the grease any place. I've got some paper towels and plastic laid out here, but you want to make sure that all of your bearings get plenty of grease, and you want to roll them around and make sure that they're actually rolling inside and getting plenty of grease. You kind of can keep pushing grease in them. This is definitely not, it feels like a bunch of peanut butter in your hand. This bearing's spinning a little bit hard, trying to get the grease laid down into the bits. It keeps trying to spin in my hand because it is so greasy. But just keep working it in there. You can work it in these edges too. You'll see there's a nice edge right here. And in these edges you can actually work grease down into them and help push it out, the bearings. We just got a wheel bearing grease from our local auto parts store. Nothing special about it. Set that one down. Let's see if we can get our second one greased up. This one seems to be spinning a whole lot better. This is definitely messy work. You want to try to hold the center of the race if you can and push this grease in around all of the bearings to make sure that it just continues to get greased up. And it's really hard to do this. And what I typically do is I'll put some grease on the inside of the hub. Not too much, but enough to kind of fill in the edges. So that it at least has some grease in there. You can drop that bearing right in there and you can work some more grease into it. Don't worry about getting grease all over the place. As long as you got some plastic out, you're going to be in good shape. Try to capture whatever leftover grease you have, get it back in the grease jar, and then you can dispose of your gloves when you're done, because it will be a mess. We'll clean up just a little bit. The next step we're going to do is we're going to try to install the seal. This particular seal looks like it's a little bit bigger than it should be. So we're going to see if we can get it to tap in there. It really feels like it's a little bit too big. We're going to do a little investigating and we'll come back to you. Well, we're now to the point to put the seal in the back part of the bearings. The problem that we're having is the seals that Speedway sent appear to be 100 or 200 too big to fit in the hole. They're extremely tight. The last one we bent up a little bit trying to get it in. We ended up having to take my sander and sander along the edges, and that's exactly what I'm going to do on this one. I'm going to sand along the edges and try to make a little bit of room to see if we can get that thing in there. The gloves here. It does get a little warm when you start sanding on this. I'm trying to sand it at a little bit of an angle so it will drop down in. While being careful not to sand through the metal. I'm using 80 grit sandpaper. Okay, this one's already bent up a little bit, but we're going to try to see if we can get it to go in. And we're lucky it looks like it's going in. You hear that ting? And that's when it's bottomed out, and it looks like we're good. We'll put a little bit of grease on that thing before we put it in, and we should be good to go. Okay, we're back, and we got the back wheel bearing in. We had a little bit of a problem with the race fitting properly, so we're going to have to contact Speedway, but we're going to go ahead and install it without the back dust seal for now, just so that we can get things mocked up, and then we'll come back and do some fit issues with it later. Speedway gave us a new nut. I'm used to using a washer and a nut. This has a built-in washer on it with no lock nut washer in there. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and spin this guy on there. Actually adjusts out really nice. What we're going to do on the brake disc is we're going to take some paper towels with a little bit of lacquer thinner so that we can get the grease off of them so that we won't disturb the surface of the new pads we're putting on. This is going to get all the oil off. And now we've got to figure out which caliper is which, and this one appears to be the one for this side. When you're installing the calipers, always make sure that the bleeder is on the top. That's so that air pockets can get out. If the bleeder is not on the top, you're never going to get the air out of the system. That's critical. I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and wash my hands and get some of this grease off so that I don't contaminate the brakes. Okay, we have some clips that go on the back of this, so the one thing you have to look at is the direction that the clips are supposed to go so that it holds in place when we push these in here. These are anti-rattle springs. And you can see it's pretty apparent which direction these are supposed to go. You want to make sure you have a couple of your bolts ready. Okay, something we're finding, we believe that we're going to have to take these inserts out so that the screw will go into the caliper. So otherwise it would never get through and catch the threads. So let's take those out. Let's try this again. Bolts that the Speedway kit gave have some sleeve to ride on, it appears. And that's as simple as it gets. Brake calipers are on. Everything's spinning. We just have to install our lines and we're home free. We're ready to go to the next side. Hey, Kurt Curtis, we're back at you again today. We put this together last night and we put it together following the instructions from Speedway Motors with the parts they provided. Though what we identified and uncovered when we started putting this together is the particular nut that they provided us, which is actually, if you look at this, it's actually a nut with a washer built into it. The problem is that once this nut seated in there far enough, we would try to put a cotter pin through the shaft. And the problem is that our shaft was sticking out here, so the cotter pin did not catch this, which means this was not feasible for our application. So we had to improvise and go back with the old style. And here's a little bit of what the old style looks like. So basically it's a ring that has a groove in it, and that groove slides over the shaft, and then we put a nut on top of that. And then on top of the nut is this device, which we can actually put a cotter pin through so that the nut doesn't come loose and you don't lose a wheel when you're driving down the road. So we're going to try this application and see if it works just a little bit better. And when you go to look online to find out how much you're supposed to tighten these, there's information that's all over the board on these. What I tend to do is I try to snug it up to get it to where it's starting to get a little pressure. And that's kind of where we're at now, maybe a little bit more. So we're getting a little pressure there. And then what I do is I come back off a quarter turn maybe, just to where this guy feels like it's flowing nice and easy again. And then all we're going to do is we're going to put this cap on, make sure it's in a location that we can slide our cotter pin through and open it, and then put our dust boot back on, and then we're going to be done and ready to go to the next side. Well, we're back at you to do the passenger side now. Now that we've had a little bit of learning on the driver's side, this one should go a whole lot smoother. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the caliper. It's already got the bearing in here, and it's already got the bearing seal. So this is ready to just slide on, and then we're going to grease up the front side. Of course, I did forget to bring the grease over. So we're going to take this, we're going to slide it on, we're going to get it to go on the back just fine. We're going to take and put some grease in on the front side, just so that it'll have some in there. This will get a little bit messy too. The front bearing's already packed, so we're going to slide it on. And as in on the other side, we're going to use the slotted washer, the nut, and the lock device. Grease cleaned up off our hands. And we'll start snugging this down. You want to try to spin it while you're snugging it. Get that grease worked in there real good. And it'll start getting a little harder to spin, like we mentioned before, once you snug it down. It's preloading it. And it's getting a little Now what we're going to do is clean this edge up a little bit because it's got a lot of grease on it. You can feel it's a little snug. What we're going to do is we're going to back off about a quarter turn. And it spins a whole lot more freely. Then we're going to put the locking mechanism on and see if we're in the ballpark, and we are not, so we're going to have to loosen it up just a tad more. Make sure that there's no play. That looks like that the cotter pin will go through. You bend the ears on the cotter pin over, and then you're ready to put the dust cap back on. So we have the dust cap with a rubber mallet, and we'll slide it on and just tap it into place. And then the rotor is on. Next step of this is the rotor's got some oil on it, so we want to get it clean before we start putting any of the brake pads. I like to use lacquer thinner. You can use brake cleaner, any kind of solvent that'll burn off. And then all we do is just get all the oil off. You can see there's a lot of yuckiness that comes. So we'll squirt the back side of it. I know I had gotten some grease on it from what I was doing. Make sure all the grease is cleaned off. Lacquer thinner helps get a little grease off of you too. Then, as we mentioned, make sure that you have the proper caliper on the right side. The bleeder should always go up, and that's so that the air can escape when you're bleeding the brakes. If you put them on the wrong side, you're never going to get your brakes to bleed properly, and it's going to be a safety issue. It's pretty apparent which side the brakes pad should go on. You should have no problem. There's a clip that goes here into the caliper. The clip goes up on top of this. Sometimes you need a little bit of help from your needle nose pliers, and it clips on, and that's good that it's nice and strong, because then you won't have an issue with it falling out while you're trying to install these. Also, when you're touching your pads, make sure that your hands are not oily if at all possible. That will also cause some contamination. You want to have your slide bars pretty handy. One thing that I forgot to mention on this one, these calipers from Speedway come with these little sliders. The sliders have to come out because these bolts actually act as the slider. They're the same size. You'll pull some hair out trying to get it threaded. Don't make the same mistake I did the first time. The instructions, I did not mention that. Of course, you know, we don't read instructions very closely, but apparently I did not see them. So then we go ahead, put the caliper in place. It helps if I install it the right direction. And your second rod will go in the same fashion. Make sure the rod locks into your pads, because it does have a locking hole. Then as you're tightening this, the stud will be coming through the outer edge of this caliper, and you want to make sure that it's lined up with the hole properly, otherwise it'll put some stress on it. these are a big Allen head. It makes it a whole lot easier if you have an Allen head socket. I have an old Craftsman set that's done me very well. Okay, that's all installed. And the next step will be to put your hose on. Now with the kit, you'll see also 2 of these copper crush washers come with it too, and you want to put it one on each side of the screw. The screw actually has a hole in it that goes through the center, and it feeds brake fluid out to the rod through that little hole. So you want to make sure that that's free and clear. And also it'll be pretty apparent what direction this hose goes. It has a slight angle. You want to make sure that the hose is facing up a little bit. This had a little plastic dust plug that we pulled out. Make sure that you keep the dust plug in until you're ready to put the hoses on. Our next step will be to put some brackets on the truck to hold the other end of this hose so that we can get the plumbing started, and that'll complete the front brakes. We're all set. Thanks for watching.
Hello, Kurt Curtis at the Full Octane Garage. Today we just finished putting the 4-wheel disc brake system on the truck. We have not done any plumbing to it yet, but we did do the front Speedway, the front brake kit from Speedway Motors. It's a complete front disc brake kit. Comes with rotors, bearings, calipers, pads, hoses, and the complete setup. So we got that installed on both front wheels. And then as we move to the back, we have a Ford 9-inch with a 4-link setup in it. And when we bought the project, it did not have any brakes on the back whatsoever. So we decided to do the Right Stuff detailing rear brake kit. I think it was about somewhere in the $300 or $400 range. It comes complete with the mounting brackets. This one does accommodate a parking brake, which we may have a little bit of frame clearance with. We may end up having to remove the parking brake assembly once it sets on the ground. We'll figure that out because we do have the truck lower than typical. The other thing is we've got a big bearing Ford 9-inch. This was a converted truck rear end, and we ran into an issue where the center hub of the rotor was not large enough. It was about 2.70. We had to get it out to about 2.95 to clear the center hub, because this is a GM bolt pattern, 5 on 4 3/4. But as you can see, it turned out to be a really nice installation. The tires have arrived. The wheels should arrive tomorrow. We'll get them mounted up and get this thing back on the ground here very quickly. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for joining us today at the Full Octane Garage. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to leave a thumbs up. Also subscribe to our channel and like us on Facebook. Also, we'd love to have some feedback on what you like, what you don't like, and things you'd like to see in the future.